As I enter the month of May looking here, this unit's supposed to be a 2-4. This is on its reduced side. I've got to put a half marker. That's still not legitimate. There's no way I can make that counter into a 2-4. There is actually no legal way I can do it. At half strength, it's a 3-4. Again, this whole thing is just a pile of crap as far as I'm concerned. The reinforcements tracking, the whole way it's handled. There are ways that other games have handled this that is much better. And it is the chief source of problems for the game. Between this and then the flipping back and forth to see how many supply points each month and try to find the proper paragraph for it, there's no really good organizational way of handling that. This is wrong. I can't even look online and see if it's been changed because they ripped the silver edition offline so that people who want to play Vassal have to actually go buy the game. One thing I'm glad of is that I didn't actually spend money on this because, and it's why I didn't, you know, I mean, I knew this was going to be I don't know if I can handle this thing. Not just because it's, you know, certainly not because it's complex, but not just because it's kind of this big operational thing that I'm afraid is going to be tedious that has this weird shaped map, but also I just don't know. You know, I don't have any trust in the company. And what I had heard, well, first of all, Decision Games has its problems, and the components show that with the glossy counters. But the side-mounted glossy map, very slippery combination, whatever it is. Other companies don't seem to have the same issue that Decision does with this, and big stacks don't work well on it. But beyond that, you know, it was really one of the things which hindered me from it. I saw deals around $300 for the whole set or whatever. Well, I wouldn't have gotten the modern rules with that either, and I would have felt pretty bummed owning it all at that point. If you can handle those things, and if you can wait until you're sure you're going to get the most modern edition of the rules that will never be upgraded because the living rules is no longer a reality, or that you'll somehow be able to get a copy of the upgrades. Yeah, maybe it's interesting, but this does not change. This does not get fixed. Maybe there's a correction in there, although the 2 or 3 times I looked with other things that bugged me, none this egregious, where I could not even create the counter using the rules of the game. I couldn't create the strength that the counter claimed to be. And so I don't know what it's supposed to be. Is that wrong? There's another counter, this 3-5 naval unit, NVL, but that's the wrong designation. It's got the wrong movement allowance. So, you know, it is impossible to create what they ask for. It is absolutely impossible. And I don't know what to do. You know, I mean, I'm going to keep playing, and I'll go with that half strength at 3 points instead of 2 and deal with it. But so much of the game is like that, and whatever realism is gained from all this picayune stuff in terms of managing the strengths of the units, etc., is just burned and thrown away by the mistakes that I'll make, and also the mistakes they made. They can't even get their order of battle in a form that the game can present, you know? Yeah, I ended up running a little over with the Germans again. They spent an assault over here, which didn't do them any good, hurt them more than it helped them. Really, the quantity of German supply, they're producing 55 a month. This is the last month they do it, but they're going to have to do some more attacks at the end of the month. Unless they see an opportunity. Right now they didn't really feel like they had much of an opportunity, but they had to do it because of the, well, I mean, I'm cheating. They should have had to do it last turn, but calculating this and estimating, can I make it next turn? Not that it's a difficult estimate, I just have to add the next 55 in. It's just too much of a pain. If I can get it close and I go over by a little bit, it's no big deal. Even if I go over by a lot, well, then I have to do some stupid things. But, yeah, I mean, you're trying to keep the offensives as small as possible, as far as I feel. And if you can, as much artillery as you can get into it, because that burns up supply and allows you to do more casualties that way. And that's very, very nice and realistic. And it actually, even though there's a firepower rule that works on all the other fronts in 1915, which allows heavy artillery to essentially negate trenches, it doesn't work on the West Front. But the artillery does somewhat mitigate the trench, because if you can get 3 hexes of full artillery and units on there, you might actually be able to destroy a moderate defensive location. You can't take out one of these big stacks. These things, those are just unbeatable. But of course you could also launch artillery attacks against the fortifications and try to destroy the fortresses themselves. That's another option. I haven't been doing that much. I probably should, because it's a cheaper option, especially where they are alone and can't fire back. But usually I can't get enough stuff into place. The rail nets, the loss of Luxembourg has been big for the Germans. It makes it very hard for them to shift stuff here. Artillery doesn't move as fast by rail, so it's kind of an unpleasant situation for them, not really being able to do that. Plus, you have to dig around and find the damn fortifications. And usually I find a hex that I can attack faster than I find a fortification that I want to attack. Just a matter of, it's such a pain to find things under all those counters. Well, the inability of the French to move sufficient troops here into Luneville meant that the Germans were able to launch another attack. And this time they shifted more artillery into the attack, which is what they really want to do, to burn the supplies. And they got a breakthrough. They got a punch into there. And now the world gets interesting. This southern front that has been mostly quiet is now breaking into a possible major exploit. Now there were some French troops running up to the line already, but they couldn't get right in there. I had to rail them in to get them into place. So it may not be easy to exploit, but it now diverts French attention down to where the Germans have been attacking here in a way that I thought that they would be able to hold out. I was able to get 100 strength points attacking, which was sufficient to knock out 7, even with the river line defending them. And now that river line's been breached, so now artillery attacks on Nancy can be made, which of course has a big old fort. And the river line doesn't really matter there. The mattering is the amount of hexes that I have control of. If I can get this one too, another river line, that would really increase the odds of being able to bombard that successfully. But it also opens up over here where there is not a fort, and there's just, you know, really mild terrain, not as big as the river, and just continue trying to roll up that front. We'll see. That could open up that whole Vasta's central, southern area. Germans attempted to increase their breakthrough by an attack on this hex, but there's a woods down here. The attack from Luneville brings that into possible play, so it's a -4 on the die roll. They ended up not succeeding at all. 6 damage to themselves, 8 to the French. And now it looks like this part of the front will stabilize as well. The problem is, of course, the Germans had to strip a lot off. The rest of the front, you can see there's a lot less there. If the French can mount a good counterattack, they may be able to punch a hole somewhere else. That's what this game is about, trying to judge how much can I get into this attack without risking too much. And it's the real question. The thing though is, well, the French have lots of manpower, but not a whole hell of a lot of supply. They're not going to be able to run this massive campaign. But a hex like this would be very valuable if they could get it. That looks fairly well defended though. There's a fortress under there. Taking Luneville back looks impossible. It's very hard to attack an attacking force because it's so heavy. So I'm not sure where they can really find a weakness. It looks like the Germans are mostly okay across the board. This is particularly weak, but what do you do if you extend that? It's not like you can come around and create a big pocket in this game. Back in the Schlieffen Plan era, you could, but now, nah. Those devastated hexes just make it too hard to move, and this whole salient is just a mess that the French cannot push through with any rapidity at all. Even though they got the rails fixed, they can get people into the salient, but they can't march through it to the front. Well, the Germans chose not to continue pursuing the offensive they had there. They started shifting some artillery over here. The French shifted some troops over. The Germans are in a bit of a problem. They have to make another attack. Legally by the end of this month, but the way I play it, well, maybe it could come at the beginning of next month. But in order to make it a sort of something that could be controlled, as opposed to it across the front hitting on like 3 different sectors or something, just to get rid of this points, it probably has to happen by the last or second to last turn of the month. And I'm having a lot of trouble finding a place, because the truth is both armies are mostly on the board. Replacement points, the French are beginning to accumulate them. Where they're not, it's because I've got units hidden in here that are damaged that I don't know what to do with. And of course, something like this, I can't figure out what I'm allowed to do with it, because I could combine it with other units of its type. It's like the Senegalese or whatever. But there's no rule that says I can use my replacement points for it. It's like those green British units, whatever the hell they are. I don't know, they may be Irish or something. I don't have any allowance to be able to replace them, but I also, and to tell you the truth, the English Guard as well probably shouldn't be allowed to be replaced. If you follow the rules precisely in this game, you have a ton of units that can't ever be replenished to any degree. And maybe that's what's intended, maybe it's not. It's hard to tell whether they actually mean the rules that they've got. I've been playing kind of fudging them, but that's maybe gotten me into as much trouble. Anyway, you've got these guys sitting here, and that means that it's hard to find, because there's flipped over stuff you can't change. And the French are especially bad at it because they have the North African troops, which I get a very limited number of points. The British have the same thing with their colonial, well, or Dominion Commonwealth troops. The Germans, less so. The Germans have one little thing, they have these mountain units, but there's actually a specific exemption that allows you to create them out of replacement points, which means that they pretty much can do whatever they like. It makes them a little easier to manage. Well, the location the Germans wanted to attack was actually essentially hidden from the French. They didn't realize over here at Reims. Everything moved up there, the artillery, a decent amount of forces. It wasn't enough. They only did 8 casualties. Remember, there's forest here in addition to the fortress and the trenches, so that's a -4 to their die roll. It's really tough, even when you throw a bunch in. But it looked like one of the best things. It ended up an equal a wash. Both sides took 8 losses. Not really something the Germans can afford, but they got to eat up their supply. And the French kind of like this position. As long as they're doing further casualties to the Germans, although they, you know, and they're not, you know, taking a significant amount themselves from it, it's got to be a good thing. And the Germans shift the axis again. The French were able to strengthen the position here. They pushed forces down into this salient down here. Now, they didn't make an attack there. They're just threatening. They can fight anywhere along here with that kind of threat. It just takes a while to move the artillery. And then they launched an attack here again. Now, this didn't go well again. 8 losses for the French, 10 for the Germans. The Germans can't afford to be taking greater losses than their opponent. And there's not much they're gaining out of this. The only thing that they're gaining is they're weakening the French everywhere, so the French have to kind of try to shift around. The Germans actually, if they're going to make bad attacks, would be better off up in here, but the French have really solidly defended this bulge. So you kind of wish, from the German point of view, that they'd stop. I'm not sure why they keep doing this. Like I said, they will need to make some attacks at some point, but maybe they should be giving the French some chance to maybe build up their own supplies. The problem, though, is the Germans have this huge advantage in supplies right now. The French managed to spend everything on their huge Paris attack. And now the Germans are doing these kind of more economical attacks. They're not trying to. They're trying to get as much artillery into place as they can. But they probably should just set up and do the pure bombardments and try to reduce the forts. That'll weaken the line substantially so that the French have to spread their forces out more. But I have trouble doing that. I see something that looks like an opportunity, and then I forget there's woods here. Well, that wraps up May and moves us into June, where there were little breaches in the lines. Those are being hopefully constructed as more trenches. We had Belfort come back online as a trench. Down here we don't seem to have any French defenders. The Germans could conceivably take some advantage of that. It's tough, though. Those corner fortifications, you know, they're right on the Swiss border. They could launch a lot of artillery against it, but it's not going to be doubled, and it's not going to really have any advantages. And shifting down there would be pretty apparent. So the French could throw some artillery down to hold that. I think there was some movement over here. I got to make sure everything's good. I know there was over here, and the Germans are digging their trench and the French are digging here. I think I got to make sure that they're in line. Anyway, we'll send this one up.